Hello there. I'm Dr. V, creator of the Resonance Clarity Framework. Welcome to Season 1 of The Resonant Leader. For the next 7 episodes, our guides will explore the personal pillar of resonance. We'll follow our protagonist, Alex, as she navigates the incoherent mind, stops absorbing external stress, and learns to find true inner clarity. Let's dive in.
Do you know that feeling when you wake up already emotionally tired?
Oh yeah, before the day even begins.
Right. Like you open your eyes, you look at the ceiling, and instead of feeling rested, you just feel this profound physical exhaustion. Welcome to this deep dive on the True Self-Awakening channel, by the way. I mean, it's almost like waking up to find someone secretly strapped a 40-pound weighted vest to your chest while you slept.
That is exactly what it feels like.
But instead of, realizing the vest is there and just taking it off, you just assume your body has suddenly forgotten how to function normally. You drag yourself out of bed, you make your coffee, and you carry that invisible weight into the shower, into your car, and into your first meeting of the day.
And what makes that scenario so insidious is how quickly you stop noticing the vest. You just stop questioning the weight.
Yeah, you just accept it.
Right. Because the human body is remarkably adaptable. If you carry a heavy load long enough, your baseline for normal just becomes chronic exhaustion. I mean, you start believing that adult life is inherently supposed to feel this agonizingly hard.
Which is the exact illusion we're trying to shatter today. We're exploring the Resonance Clarity Framework
Drawn directly from the core of Dr. V's insights.
that explains why we carry that weight, what it actually is, and the mechanics of finally putting it down.
It's such a powerful framework.
It really is. And to ground all these concepts, the materials follow a protagonist. Her name is Alex. And over the course of our 5 seasons, we're going to follow her entire story arc, map out this incredible journey for her, starting from this exact state of waking burnout and eventually scaling all the way to global leadership.
Which sounds like a huge leap, I know.
Right. But today, we're starting at the very beginning of her story, which honestly looks remarkably similar to the beginning of ours.
It really does. And I think it's helpful to look really closely at Alex's life here, because the disconnect between her external reality and her internal state is just jarring. I mean, if you looked at her resume or, say, her LinkedIn profile, you'd be totally intimidated.
Oh, absolutely. She looks flawless on paper.
Exactly. She's highly intelligent, she's exceptionally capable, respected by her colleagues, and she's got a really solid group of friends. By every societal metric we have, she has won the game.
But her internal reality, and it's like a completely different universe. I mean, she wakes up with this constant low-grade knot in her stomach.
Yep. The anxiety is just always there.
And she'll spend 45 minutes overthinking a 3-sentence email to her boss. She absorbs the mood of literally whatever room she walks into. So by the time she gets home, she sits in her driveway for 10 minutes just to muster the energy to go inside.
Oh, the driveway sit. So many of us do that.
Right. Just staring at the steering wheel. And when she finally collapses on the couch, she has absolutely nothing left in the tank.
And faced with that level of drain, Alex does what, pretty much everyone does. She completely misdiagnoses the problem.
She thinks it's a scheduling issue, right?
Exactly. She assumes she has a logistical failing. She tells herself she needs a stricter morning routine or a better time-blocking app, or that she simply lacks the discipline to manage her energy.
Which I fall into that trap constantly. It is so much easier to buy a new planner than to deal with physiological burnout.
Oh, I mean, who hasn't bought a new notebook thinking it'll fix their life?
Exactly. We think color-coding our calendar will somehow cure a nervous system that is just screaming for relief.
But it's an illusion of control. A productivity hack cannot regulate a nervous system. So the framework introduces this crucial paradigm shift here. It says Alex doesn't have a time management problem. She has a frequency problem.
A frequency problem.
Right. Her internal state is completely out of alignment, and this manifests as this tangible psychological burden that's a heavy bag.
Okay, I want to unpack that term, because frequency problem can sound, I don't know, a little esoteric.
It can, yeah.
Like when I hear frequency, I think of radio waves or acoustics. But the Resonance Clarity Framework pairs this invisible concept with a really physical metaphor, the heavy bag. So how do those two things actually connect?
Well, we have to look at frequency through a biological lens. You know, your nervous system is constantly humming at a certain state of arousal. Like, are you in a sympathetic fight or flight state where your heart rate is up and you're just scanning for threats?
Right, the high alert mode.
Exactly. Or are you in a parasympathetic rest and digest state? That baseline state is your frequency. So when your nervous system is chronically dysregulated, it creates this massive metabolic and cognitive load on your body.
So the heavy bag is like the physical weight of that stress.
Yes, it's the psychological and physical symptom of being trapped in that chaotic frequency. It feels heavy because your body is literally working overtime just to maintain baseline functioning.
Okay, so if we were to physically unzip Alex's heavy bag, right, and look at what's actually causing that metabolic load, what are we looking at?
Oh, it is just packed with unvetted emotional weight. Decades-old narratives about what a good employee or a perfect partner is supposed to look like. The constant lingering fear of disappointing other people.
So just massive amounts of emotional absorption.
Exactly. She is carrying the anxieties and the expectations of everyone she interacts with.
Which leads perfectly into how the framework categorizes human mental states.
Right.
Because the resonance clarity framework outlined 3 distinct minds, right? And the first one, which governs this whole chaotic state, is called the incoherent mind.
Right. And the incoherent mind operates on what the framework calls the absorber frequency.
The absorber frequency.
Yeah, this is a state where your psychological and emotional filtration system is just completely offline. You basically become an emotional sponge.
So you just soak up everything.
Exactly. Whatever is in your environment bypasses your boundaries and comes directly into your internal space.
And the daily manifestations of this in the framework are almost like uncomfortably recognizable. I mean, Alex goes to work and she over-prepares for a standard Tuesday presentation to this exhausting degree, purely out of a fear of being judged.
She's terrified of making us...
Right. She absorbs the ambient panic of her office. Then she goes to dinner with friends and agrees to plan a trip she has literally zero desire to go on. And then she comes home, her partner is pacing the kitchen, stressed about money.
And instantly, Alice's chest tightens. She adopts his financial anxiety as her own biological reality.
Wow. Yeah, she just takes it all on.
And notice what happens to her own identity in those moments. It just evaporates. I mean, the texts point out that this state is frequently labeled in corporate culture as imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah, we hear that term all the time.
Right, but the framework completely reframes that label. The imposter mind isn't a permanent medical diagnosis. It's not an identity. It's just a survival-based mental habit.
Wait, so it's not actually who you are?
Not at all. When you're operating in the absorber frequency, your mind whispers that you aren't enough, simply because you've completely lost connection to who you actually are. You've just become a reflection of everyone else's demands.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, though.
Sure, go for it.
Because on the surface, being highly attuned to what other people need just sounds like empathy. And society constantly reinforces that being responsive to others is a virtue. So if I actively stop caring about my partner's stress or my friend's disappointment, I sound entirely selfish. I mean, is the framework suggesting that empathy itself is the heavy bag?
Oh, that's such an important distinction. No, the framework draws a very sharp biological line between empathy and absorption.
Okay. How so?
Well, empathy is a state of regulation. It's the capacity to stand next to someone, witness their pain, and hold space for them, while keeping your own nervous system entirely grounded. You maintain your boundary.
Oh, I see. So I can look at my partner and say, I see you are incredibly stressed about money and we will work through this without letting my own heart rate spike to like 120 beats per minute.
That is the crucial difference, yes.
Yeah.
Absorption, which drives the incoherent mind, happens when that boundary just collapses. You see your partner's stress and your mirror neurons fire so intensely that your nervous system registers their stress as an immediate physical threat to your own survival.
Wow. So you aren't walking beside them anymore.
Right. You are strapping their anxiety into your heavy bag and attempting to metabolize it for them. And it is chronically exhausting because you're trying to resolve emotions that you have zero actual control over, because they belong to someone else.
That makes a lot of sense. You can't physically digest someone else's lunch for them, and you can't metabolize their anxiety either. But what happens when you just keep trying? Like, a nervous system can only absorb so much ambient chaos before it simply runs out of bandwidth.
Absolutely.
There has to be a breaking point, right?
There is. And it is pretty violent. The body cannot sustain an infinite amount of incoming stimuli. So when the nervous system reaches absolute maximum capacity, it snaps. It forcefully shifts into the second state outlined in the framework, which is the protector mind.
which operates on the defender frequency, right?
Yes, exactly. The defender frequency. The underlying biology completely shifts. The incoherent mind tries to merge with everything in its environment to stay safe. But the protector mind decides that nothing in the environment is safe, and it needs to construct an impenetrable wall immediately.
It goes on the offensive.
Right. Cortisol floods the system, your breathing becomes shallow, your vision literally narrows, you move into pure aggressive defense.
And the resonance clarity framework highlights how incredibly messy this transition looks for Alex. Like, after a 12-hour day of absorbing everyone's demands, she walks through her front door. Her partner asks a totally benign, everyday question like, "Did you remember to pick up the dry cleaning?"
And she just loses it.
She absolutely explodes. She bites his head off, lists every single thing she has done for the household that week, and storms out of the room, slamming the door, which creates immediate distance and totally unnecessary conflict.
And that explosion is a massive, sudden fluctuation in the weight of the bag. The internal pressure of all that absorbed energy gets so intense that the only way the biological system can release it is through outward conflict or total shutdown.
I'm reading this, though, and feeling quite skeptical about the terminology.
How do you mean?
Well, calling an explosive outburst the protector mind sounds an awful lot like giving ourselves a free pass for terrible behavior. Like, if I snap at my family because I had a hard day, I don't think I get to just wave it off and say, "Oh, sorry, that was just my defender frequency acting up." Doesn't this framework completely remove personal accountability?
It's a vital question. It really is.
Yeah.
But we have to separate accountability from physiological reality here. The framework is absolutely not saying that yelling at your spouse is acceptable just because you're in a protector state.
Right. You still have to apologize.
Exactly. You still have to repair the relational damage you caused. What the framework is actually doing is removing the paralyzing shame that usually follows the outburst.
Oh, the shame cycle.
Yeah.
Because the framework notes that after Alex yells, the adrenaline fades and she is crushed by a massive wave of guilt, right? Which she then just stuffs right back into the heavy bag.
Yes. And to understand the protector mind better, think about the circuit breaker in your house.
Okay.
If you plug a space heater, a microwave, a hairdryer, and a toaster into the exact same outlet, the circuit gets overloaded.
Sure.
But instead of letting the wires melt inside the walls and burning the entire house down to the foundation, the circuit breaker deliberately trips. It snaps. It plunges the house into darkness.
Wow. Okay.
We don't view the circuit breaker as malicious or morally corrupt, right? We recognize that it shut the system down to prevent a total catastrophe. So the protector mind is your biological circuit breaker. It shuts down your capacity to connect because if it absorbed one more demand, your psyche would literally shatter.
That reframing changes everything. If I understand that snapping is just a defense mechanism, I can stop the guilt spiral. I can apologize for the behavior without internalizing the belief that I'm inherently a toxic person. I can just look at the situation and say, hey, my circuit overloaded.
Exactly. You stop judging the explosion itself, and you start rigorously questioning what you allowed to be plugged into your system throughout the day that caused the overload in the first place.
Okay, so if the incoherent mind burns us out by absorbing the world, and the protector mind isolates us by attacking the world, what is the viable alternative? Because we can't just spend our lives bouncing back and forth between being a doormat and being a dictator.
Right. Which introduces the ultimate goal of the framework, the third and final state, the aligned mind.
The aligned mind.
Yes. This mind operates on the resonator frequency. And in some parts of the materials, it's also referred to as the angelic mind.
Yeah, the physical description of this state is incredibly appealing. It sounds like, I don't know, taking off a tight pair of shoes at the end of a long day. The texts say it's grounded, clear, and exceptionally calm. Like, you maintain your boundaries effortlessly. You don't absorb the chaos, but you don't feel the need to construct a fortress against it either. You just simply exist in your own space.
And when a person shifts into the aligned mind, the physical sensation of the heavy bag fundamentally transforms. The weight just drops away. You're no longer lugging around borrowed emotions or reacting purely from survival instincts.
So you're finally traveling light.
Yes, you're operating from internal biological harmony. The external world might still be chaotic. I mean, your industry might be crashing, your kids might be screaming, but your internal frequency remains unshakable.
Which brings us to Alex's major breakthrough. But honestly, the way it's presented initially made me roll my eyes a little bit.
Really?
Well, the text says she didn't achieve this by moving to a monastery or completely upending her life. It says it started in a painfully ordinary moment with her simply asking herself one out-of-the-blue question. She asks, why does life feel heavier for me than it does for other people? And I just thought, Are we really supposed to believe that asking a single introspective question instantly cures a lifetime of chronic burnout?
Ah, okay. Well, it absolutely does not cure it instantly. And assuming it does, misses the entire mechanism of change here. The question is not the cure. The question is the wedge.
The wedge, like opening a door.
Right. For Alex's entire adult life, she believed that the heavy, exhausted feeling was her core identity. She was entirely fused with the heavy bag. Her internal narrative was basically, I'm just an anxious person. I am just someone who struggles to keep up.
So she confused a habit for an identity.
Exactly. When she finally asks that question, it's the very first time she creates psychological distance between herself and the exhaustion. She looks at the weight objectively as something separate from her being. And that single moment of curiosity fractures the trance of the incoherent mind.
Okay, I see.
It doesn't instantly rewire her nervous system, but it proves to her that the frequency she's trapped in is a learned, operational pattern.
Yeah.
And neuroplasticity dictates that any pattern that is learned can eventually be unlearned.
So it introduces friction into the system. Like before the question, she assumed the weighted vest was permanently fused to her ribs. After the question, she realizes there are buckles. And maybe, with enough effort, she can figure out how to undo them.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
It's the beginning of a grueling, deeply uncomfortable process of decoupling who she actually is from the panic state her nervous system defaults to.
It requires immense daily practice. It means that the next time her partner walks in stressed about finances, she feels that deeply ingrained biological urge to absorb his panic, but she has to actively pause, tolerate the discomfort of not fixing it for him, and consciously choose to be grounded in her own frequency.
Which is so hard.
Yeah.
But this friction and this practice are why the broader architecture of this framework is so compelling, I think. This personal realization for Alex is just the ground floor. The texts map out an extensive multi-stage evolution for her.
Yeah, it's brilliant how it builds.
Right. We watch her navigate this initial awakening, and then the materials project how these exact same principles scale up to massive arenas over the next 4 seasons.
It's a remarkable trajectory. Once she begins to master her internal frequency, the framework follows her into high-stakes corporate environments, demonstrating how the aligned mind completely transforms organizational leadership. And eventually the framework scales these concepts all the way up to global political leadership.
Which sounds like a massive leap, right? Going from personal exhaustion to global impact. But the logic holds up perfectly. Because imagine a CEO or a head of state operating from the incoherent mind, constantly absorbing the panic of the stock market or the hysteria of the public.
It would be chaos.
Total chaos. Or imagine them trapped in the protector mind, constantly defensive, viewing every ally as a potential threat and making policy decisions based on a tripped circuit breaker. The downstream consequences for millions of people are disastrous.
And it underscores one of the most vital truths in the materials. World-class leadership, whether you're leading a family, a Fortune 500 company, or a nation, it does not begin with external communication strategies or policy knowledge. It begins with internal biological coherence.
Wow, yeah.
You cannot possibly guide a team or a country through a crisis if your own nervous system is constantly melting down. Personal alignment is the absolute non-negotiable foundation for sustainable real-world impact.
But before anyone needs to worry about leading a nation, or even just running a Tuesday staff meeting, we have to deal with our own waking exhaustion. Which brings us to the immediate practical application for you listening to this right now. The materials don't just leave you with a philosophical metaphor. They provide a diagnostic tool to help you figure out exactly which mind is driving your daily reactions.
Yes. The framework utilizes a tool called the Resonance Clarity Assessment. It's completely free, and the texts emphasize that it is incredibly fast, taking less than 2 minutes to complete.
So where do they go to take it?
You can access it at drv.com.
Yeah, VIE.com.
And what makes this assessment really valuable is that it goes beyond just handing you a static label. Taking it actually unlocks a personalized alignment meditation, which is designed to help you start that actual biological process of unbuckling your own heavy bag.
2 minutes to definitively figure out if you're chronically absorbing the world, constantly defending against it, or actually resonating within it. That is a massive return on investment for understanding the baseline state of your own nervous system.
It really is.
So let's distill all of this down to the core insight. If you take away one thing from this deep dive today, let it be this. Waking up exhausted, feeling utterly drained before your feet even hit the floor, is not a personal failure. You do not need to try harder, and you definitely do not need a better productivity app. What you are experiencing is the very real physical symptom of a nervous system trapped in the incoherent mind. You are carrying a heavy bag filled with absorbed expectations and fears that just do not belong to you.
But just like Alex, you have the mechanical ability to step back, observe your frequency, and begin the rigorous work of shifting toward an aligned mind. And as you begin to navigate that shift, please grant yourself some profound grace. We all default to the absorber frequency when we desperately want to be loved and accepted, and we all trip the circuit breaker and lash out from the protector mind when we are overwhelmed and terrified.
Yeah, we're all human.
Right. Those survival mechanisms have kept you safe in a very chaotic world. They did their job. But as the core of Dr. V's insights remind us, they do not have to dictate the rest of your life.
You can recognize those mechanisms, thank them for their service, and finally put the bag down. Which leaves us with a fascinating, slightly provocative thought to carry with you as you go about your day. If your internal frequency dictates how heavy your own life feels... Wait, let me rephrase that. If your internal frequency dictates how heavy your own life feels, what happens to the people around you when you finally decide to drop your heavy bag?
Oh, that's a great question.
When you stop absorbing their stress and solving their emotional problems for them, do they get lighter, too? Or do they suddenly realize, maybe for the very first time, that they have to start carrying their own weight? I highly recommend you listen to the upcoming episodes and seasons to find out.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. You can find more info on drv.com.
We will see you next time.
This is Dr. V. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Your journey, I'm sure. And if you want to know exactly which frequency is running your leadership right now, I invite you to take the free Resonance Clarity Assessment. You'll find the link in the show notes. You can take responsibility for your resonance. And I shall see you next time. Bye for now.